2 seconds.
Thanks.
Sorry,
Yep.
call to order. Okay, everybody, it's, this is the meeting of the Capital Budget Committee. It's February 25th, 24th. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We do a roll call. Chris?
Chris Peich, present.
Ralph Dormus are here.
Present.
Lyons present.
Ray Evans present.
Susan Franklin, present. Say Ellen?
Okay, so I'd like to call to order, this is a joint meeting of the Cohasset Select Board and the Cohasset Capital Budget Committee. I'd like to call to order the Select Board meeting. Roll call, please. Mr. Plex,
Chris Plex here.
Mr. Grady,
Already here.
Mr. Grady,
Jack Creighton here.
David Frog here.
Ellen Mar present. Thank you.
Okay. So first on the agenda is obviously discussing the town hall project, and I want to thank everybody on the committee for the paperwork that you put together. It was very thorough, and I think we got the meeting. So do you want to present in a particular sequence, or do you want?
Yeah, so I have some opening comments that I'm gonna
Okay.
make, and then I'm gonna punt to probably Mark and Nick, and then Chris will go over the financial portion of it.
Okay. Because
Okay. So I'd like to thank everybody who's here on committees and boards and not. And as everyone knows, since 2008, we've had a multitude of town hall projects. Some hit town meeting floor, some did not, some hit the ballot, some did not. None of them passed. And with the promise of every failure, there was a new project in the offing. And so what happened was lots of deferred maintenance and upkeep. So 2 things are clear. 1, municipal government is not moving out of 41 Highland Avenue. And 2, voters in Cohasset are not interested in a complete overhaul and redesign of town hall. That being said, we cannot defer the maintenance and upkeep of the building any longer. We owe it to the town and our employees to provide a safe, secure, and efficient, both energy and otherwise, building in which to work to complete town business. And we're obligated to our citizens also to provide access to town services that is safe as well. So some months ago, we formed what we called an ad hoc town hall working group. And last year, a nonprofit entity began to form and show interest in the historic section of town hall. And this group, we currently refer to it as the Cultural Center, brought energy, enthusiasm, and handshake agreements on private funding to restore the auditorium and the ancillary spaces related to the auditorium and the stage. They have outlined programming opportunities that they envision for the space. Town would lease the space back at the Cultural Center on a long-term basis. Although not unique in the Commonwealth, this collaboration creatively shifts some of the burden of restoration from the town to the nonprofit group. We'll work out the terms of the lease as well as all the operating protocols and responsibilities in due time. We're not there yet. I know it was one of your questions. We're not there yet, but it'll be in progress, and you'll get an update when we have one. We've spent many meetings discussing and debating, what does this look like? Who is responsible for what? How does the money work? What are our goals? What is our timeline? Do we phase this in over time? If so, what are the financial implications? And most importantly, what does that do to the work of our staff? Or do we do it all at once? And so we answered the last question first. We do it all at once. And most importantly, we're here tonight to present what we envision doing for town hall. So our plan is to restore the access to the historic section, the 2nd floor, by completing the fire suppression requirements. That will need to be done so staff can move back into the building once work commences on 135 King Street. We currently have 5 staff members positioned at 135 King Street. We want to secure the building envelope with new windows and doors where needed. We need to address HVAC deficiencies, particularly in the cooling area. We need to shore up some miscellaneous framing needs, such as rotted joists, rotted windowsills, and things along those lines. We need to prepare some utility work, electrical wiring, and plumbing lines. It all sounds very glamorous, doesn't it? We need to address the ADA issues. And then we need to reconfigure spaces as needed to create more efficient use of space, paint, carpet, and perhaps refinishing the hardwood floors on the 2nd floor of the historic building. This is not a gut job. Hallways, staircases, doors, elevators, bathrooms, and all the dead spaces that are in the annex will remain where they are. We're not here tonight to discuss any of this particular system specifications or requirements at this point in time. We will provide that information when we have it, but we're just going to talk in general about these items that I've been talking about. Certain departments will end up moving out of 41 Highland Ave. For example, and just an example, buildings and inspections may move to Elm Street when the Elm Street location is reconfigured for just the fire department. Facilities will occupy the former teen center in the town parking lot. They presently don't have a home. And we also have space at the water department and perhaps a few other areas as well. It's our goal to get the public-facing departments on the first floor of the annex. While this work happens, we've been offered month-to-month space for staff to relocate if needed. We'll make use of remote work and other options also as needed when the time is right. We have commitments from our town hall staff that they have the bandwidth to see this project through to completion, all other town projects notwithstanding. That's been a very strong point for us is, does our staff have the time and the energy to get this done? They're very excited to work on this decrepit, inefficient, and embarrassing annex portion of the building. They want to have pride in their workspace and they want to feel comfortable in the environment. And as their employers, it's our obligation to provide this for them. We will leave the strategic planning to the expertise of Chris, Michelle, Nick, John, and Brian. They understand the mission is to complete the work with as little disruption as possible and as quickly as possible. Town Hall is our #1 goal for the select board for FY '25. We got it in our goals from last July. With approval at town meeting, we'll commence the work immediately. The only item at this time that is not included due to some of the proposed work is paving of the parking lot, which will be an FY '27 request. Regarding funding sources, there is no free cash for this. We've utilized the gift money from the Toll Brothers project to fund the HVAC design, so that will come off our original $635,000 request. After strapping the chimney, there will be about $163,000 from the roof project as a turnback, and we will apply to CPC for some of the work on the historic portion of the building, which was in the spreadsheet that you all received. We will, if so desired, provide periodic updates on the progress of this initiative, not only to you as a group, but also to the public in our select board meetings. So at this point, unless anyone has any questions, perhaps Nick, Brian, and Mark could talk through the spreadsheet.
So what we first tried to do here is we come up, I can't see. So we first did was itemize the items between the historic building and the annex, as well as a column showing what services would be shared between both buildings. So totaling those down, we then added the contingencies, the design, the project management for each of those items, and then allocated the shared items back on a 60-40 split. And the 60-40 split is based on square footage. And the calculation of that square footage is there on the left. So you can, it actually comes out conveniently to 60-40. But, and then we left the CPC contribution blank for now. We did show the 90,000 deduction from the Toll Brothers and the 163 from the roof to get us to a total of 5.4. And again, these numbers come from industry unit costs. They come from some input from subcontractors that have given us pricing specific to the work at 41 Highland Ave. So it's a combination of both. Nothing's been designed at this time. The only thing that's currently underway in terms of design is the HVAC system.
I think also you've got designs for the fire suppression, don't you? I think you got
Sprinklers are done.
Yeah, I think you got that.
Okay.
And also got a design for the alarm system is still in place. Okay, you got some of the designs.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
fire sprinkler system, the alarm system, the HVAC.
yeah, that's what I thought. Right. Okay.
But in term, and the intent here was some of this work would be using ideas from designs in the past, especially in the historic side, utilizing that design of the bathrooms and the catering kitchen out front of the historic, and taking some of those ideas that we've come up with in the past here and applying them. But we still would need ultimately a new design for any work. But we would need to redesign the ADA entrances to conform to current standards.
When I looked at the projects, I sort of boiled it down to sort of the 80-20 analysis, and I sort of came up with 6 that account for like 3.1 of the 3.7 or so million. It's ADA 240, it's Windows 200, it's annex partitions at roughly 600, fire at 400,000, HVAC, the biggie, 1.6. and a generator at 135,000. So it looks like there's a lot of projects on the list. But when you literally take the cutoff of 100,000 or higher,
Mhm.
it really boils down to 6 major things that we're attempting in terms of upgrades.
And these are again, a lot of these things like, like the HVAC is replacing an aged system since it was put in. So it's an end of life system that's been Band-Aid. Some are new, like the fire protection in the historic, never had it. It's an all new system there. But certainly much needed work. And then some of that annex work that for the 600,000 is to optimize the space that we have. We think about the space outside of the town manager's office, and there's a lot of empty space, and we used to hold town meeting, select board meetings up there. So trying to,
Weave world.
a way to try to better optimize that space and reconfigure the space that we have. And this is a bare bones approach. This isn't a shiny new project. There's really not much here on the outside, except for the ADA entrances, some exterior doors. The roof was obviously already done. But the building's already been painted. It was painted a couple of years ago. So
About the windows though, Mark,
that is in here.
that's in there, right? Yeah.
Well, the windows is
Yeah.
in here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the infill of the old air conditioning units, the removal and infill of those units would be part of this, but it's not a full.
That's coming out. I gather the
Once the new
chiller- the
system-
chiller's gone, right?
Once the new system is in, those window units would be gone.
Yeah, okay.
We talk a little bit about the timeline.
Sure. Sure.
As I think we have discussed, is trying to save money, is maybe reusing the Dare boilers that are currently in the basement. That goes along with the study. And Mark had mentioned the windows, is to get the building back to where it's, and maybe repurpose the annex to where it's aesthetically pleasing for the common. So when we say windows, and the cost is that we have the 80s fan windows, is maybe doing something constructive, like putting in just panes to make it look, comparable
So
to
match.
match up. So
Historic.
when you go down across the common, Ralph, you look at it and you say,
Oh, I know.
they kind of catch, so they meet. So we have that 80s ski lodge type annex in an 1820s building, right?
I mean, no disparaging comments.
No, none whatsoever. But you just
Factual.
to try to tie them in, tie them in together.
Right,
So when you
right.
go by in the
Right.
place, it looks like an asset to the common, repurposing the first in
Okay.
the auditorium. piece. But I just wanted the group to know that we are looking, trying to cost save as far as the boilers and Repurposing.
Just clarify that. So you got a couple of boilers down there now. And of course, they run the fan coil units, which are in the current annex. Would you continue that, or would you add, are you gonna supplement that? Or are you gonna continue those boilers for the long term?
my hope being in the heating business is that we just repurpose that for heat. I'll leave that to Brian's good offices to come up with, will it tie in? to the
Okay,
Existing boilers? I mean, I don't know, Ralph, because
Okay.
the study is gonna maybe
So-
tell us that it's not economical to
Yeah.
do that,
Yeah.
but
So we have a very qualified engineer looking at it, and part of their work is to estimate the cost of installation of a system,
yeah,
soup to nuts, and then as well as the operating costs of it.
Yeah.
So you look at the operating costs and the upfront costs.
Yeah.
And you evaluate, okay, which one's better for us? Maybe this is the cheapest option today. versus the next option, which pays itself back in 3 or 5 years,
Understand.
right? And then maybe the next one pays it back in 20 years.
Well, you're talking about, one would be the boilers, the other be what, a split system or something of the sort, or maybe a combination of the two, in other words.
Yep, and I mean, like this building has a VRF system and, you know, so that's kind of,
Okay,
again, it's energy consumption, you know, being able to control individual spaces,
right,
right? So that the whole second floor of the historic building isn't one zone that,
yeah, right,
Mhm.
right, okay. And would this, would the second floor of the historic building continue to be used as an office space or not?
For the most part, yes.
It would-
We're looking at maybe a bit of shared space if we work with the nonprofits, but that's the nice thing about this whole new iteration is we're working hand in glove with people like Brian, Nick,
Right.
all the people that actually service and work in the building.
Okay,
So a lot of that's gonna come up to them. Our initial thought was, you know, to see what we had available upstairs, but if we have to repurpose and use them for offices, we're gonna have to find the best way forward. And, but it's also working with the nonprofit group is, you know, calling them that. We also have to, because they're offering to put in, you know, a fairly substantial sum.
yeah, I look at the list that,
Yes, it's pretty-
Glenn is committed.
all the extent,
Glenn is
so
committed, so-
we've got some give we've got to do, and that's sitting down, as Ellen said earlier, to work that out with them.
Yeah, right.
But come up with something creative. I mean, we're trying to think outside the box.
Yeah.
You know, because the building has been in a number of different iterations over the last 20 or 30 years. It's, you know, it serves the town no purpose just to let it sit up there and do what it's doing right now.
Well, you know that, you know, for a decade or more, that's been my, I don't know, advocacy for what you're doing now. So obviously I support where you're going. I really do. I
The
think,
difference is, I'll be honest with you, Ralph, and then again, I appreciate that, is we all do, is that we want to get it done, you know, and get it done as soon as we can, start the project and, you know, not piecemeal it. It's just get it done. The town's gonna go through upheaval. If we have to lease a little space to make our town staff comfortable, we have to lease some space.
Yeah.
And that's even while King Street's going on, because, you know, if we go through a year or so, but bump and grind, then we have smooth sailing ahead.
Yeah.
You know, everything's working, so, you know, then the next project will come up, but it won't be anything like these. So we're trying to get all the high hanging fruit picked and,
and I
you know,
support that.
let the low stuff
Yeah, right.
take care of itself.
I think, it would be hard to say this isn't what we wanted for a long time. We did. We really did. We thought this was the way to handle this thing. We might have wanted it piecemeal, as you know. But I think doing it as a comprehensive project is great. If you're gonna do that in a short time, a year or whatever it's gonna take, I think that's terrific.
Well, we chipped. I mean, we got the roof.
Yeah.
It was a start.
Right.
Which is nice. Get the chimney strapped in. We're
Right.
looking again, Brian and Nick have been invaluable.
Yep. I know.
Coming up with and, you know, utilizing the people that work there. I mean, it's their building too. And
Yep.
so, you know, they've got skin in the game. I haven't seen that in really in all ritters, but it was nice to be able to sit down with them and the guys, what's going to make this building work for you? And that's a really important factor, because it's not only the town's building, it's their building.
Oh, we understand it.
And,
A quick question for John here. Gonna be an approval out of this thing.
Yeah, we've been working with them for most of the project, answering questions as they come up.
Okay,
And they've been kind of zeroing in and made some adjustments, whether it be windows, the doors for handicap accessible
Right.
ramp.
Right.
So that as they come up, we kind of address them one by one and see what's needed, whether it's a lift for the
okay.
future stage,
Yeah.
that type of stuff. So,
This is gonna get your signature, right?
yeah, they put a lot of questions go back.
Okay.
I do have one question on how to think about the $950,000.
Mhm.
I completely understand the need to have a contingency. I guess my question is more if for some happy accident, we don't have to use any or only have to use some of it, what is the plan? Is the plan to try and do more? Or is the plan to scale back or just keep to the list of projects?
I mean, there really, I mean, there hasn't been an intention to take it further, but there are some things that have been identified as not on the list, like, you know, the parking lot. So, you know, maybe that might be a good opportunity if something wasn't needed or used from the contingency. The contingency is also held at 20% right now, which is sort of high when you think of it, if it was designed, but the fact that none of this is designed right now and this is all high level pricing, that's why you would that's why at this stage it's appropriate to hold 20%.
I mean, because when we typically talk with departments, we usually throw in a 10% contingency. So it's part of the reason for the question is it's double what what I've seen.
And as you design some of this work, it's not uncommon to see some of the cost of the work go up, but then you really pull that from that contingency as you're designing the work, because they're, as you can see, they're round numbers. They're not
Yeah.
calculated.
Windows are not gonna be $200,000.
No, not a chance. There'll be something different, but
Right.
higher or lower, but they'll be.
So if I'm understanding what you're saying, the contingency is a healthy contingency. If we don't have to eat through all of the contingency, instead of expanding scope to capture some of those, perhaps a better use is paving.
Yeah, or something of that nature, right? I mean, by the time there's gonna be a better known value of the contingency, you're gonna be further down the road of completion. So it's not gonna be a time to say, let's put an addition on, right? That's where, you gotta save that contingency as you go through.
Until the end.
There's a slow consumption of it, right? Because you're gonna that's why it's there, is you'll need it throughout construction.
And I guess part of the reason for asking is like ultimately the amount of debt service that we take on is directly related into how much contingency we eat into. That's $1 million. That's $125,000 a year.
And I think we've talked about this in the past where we only actually get the debt service for what we actually use.
Right. And then, but I'm
So
saying
if we
like,
don't use that, yes, then.
it's the difference between, 3.5 to 4.5, and that $1 million is $125,000 a year in
Mhm.
interest and principal to the town. So if it's needed, it's needed. If it's not.
So let me tee off that, so for the finance part of this, I mean, before we talked about it was a debt exclusion, right? We wouldn't borrow more money than we needed to. Obviously, I'm guessing that's what this is for. As a matter of how it works for capital with such a big contingency, would it be one article for the full amount and then it would just work in the debt service? It would be what it was, or just how does that translate to the spreadsheet that we're gonna see going forward? If we don't use all the contingency, let's say, for instance, in this example.
So we recommend it to authorize the entire amount up front. If it's not used, it just gets rescinded. So any amount that it doesn't get borrowed, authorize the entire amount. You don't borrow until you need it. I'll talk more about that.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
And then if you end up, only needing 4 and you've authorized 5, it's something you have town meeting. We do this periodically. Town meeting will just rescind the authorization. That's all.
Okay.
Or $100,000, whatever it is.
Let's continue with that.
Okay, and then Mark, are there any other things that are not on the list? That's the other thing we talked about. One of the things we're looking at is projection. If this is gonna be 10 years, how does this look over the next 10 years, right? We got 10 years of stuff. What else is coming down the pipeline? We don't want to get hit with a pipe.
I would say this is a pretty comprehensive look at it. I mean, it's not, we noted that it's not the parking lot, so that's a separate item, and it doesn't include anything with the historic barn in the back.
Okay.
There's no plan to do anything with that.
And the auditorium space is sort of off limits because that's being covered by the cultural center.
Correct. There's no, so the historic side of the house here would
The
be.
first floor.
Would be the first floor in the back basement stage area behind the stage would be
Really
part. Would be part of the cultural group. The part of this portion, it would be more of the structural repairs to that space. And then the
Abatement.
yeah, the abatement, anything existing there, the hazardous abatement, so there's a fire curtain there, there's some asbestos piping insulation that's still there. So all that would be covered through this project.
Basically, we box it out for the nonprofits to get in there and start doing their thing. It's but we make it habitable and not habitable. They're gonna make it habitable, I'm sorry, but safe for them to make it habitable.
We make it occupiable.
And I'm gonna toss something out there.
Systems, HVAC systems, shared building system.
Corey had asked an interesting question, but just to partially answer it, if I may.
Yeah.
You know, that's the nice thing about working with Brian and Nick. They're going through the building with a fine tooth comb.
Yeah.
You know, they're looking under rugs, they're tearing up floors, they're looking behind walls. It's something we haven't done before. And so again, so they're looking to see, you know, where we can save, what we can add, what we can fix. So I mean, these guys are pros as far as I'm concerned, it's their building. So getting in there, we're cautiously optimistic that it's going to save us.
Right.
In the long run. It's like what we did, Michelle was able to get the roof. So we were able to subtract the cost of the study off what she saved. Strapping in the chimney, which was something, you know, and my first thoughts were we're gonna have to tear it down, but strapping it now, repointing it, we can use it. So we're trying to not cut corners, but be as
Efficient.
efficient.
Yeah, make a
Good word.
Yeah, and I think that goes to the contingency question earlier. I think we know a lot more about this building than we've ever known.
But we're certainly gonna find out things. There'll be things that we don't want, and we didn't want.
Right, but I think that we've limited,
Mhm.
the universe of the potential oops,
Yeah.
I mean, it's that situation.
And,
By doing things like sending these guys in there and really looking under the hood a lot more
and
than.
we're really we're addressing those systems that need to be addressed. We're not addressing the systems that, in an idyllic world would be fixed, right? So, just for instance, there is the historic side of Old Town Hall on the second floor. You'll see some exposed conduit in some of the offices. That will stay. We're not going to be opening up walls of the second floor historic and doing a total gut reno up there. It works. You just see the pipe, but you see it, but that's fine. You're going to see it.
Mark, how about the IT, any IT stuff?
We're looking, and Michelle helped me with this, we're looking at moving a lot of that, Ralph, like we're down where the old planning board used to meet
Yeah.
in the basement, cleaning that area. We want to maximize the space. I think we have some room.
We have some room carved out in the new 135 King Street, the public safety building, to move some of the services.
Okay.
But
But you
the
also got the
server-
basic,
like the servers.
you got the basic,
Yeah.
you have to have a server, you have to
Yeah.
have Wi-Fi distribution, you have to have Ethernet cables. I mean,
Yeah.
okay, all right.
So that's
Right.
moving from, what is that, scrappy conference room down to the basement?
It'll likely, it may stay up there, but it'll be boxed in.
Boxed.
So it'll be aesthetically pleasing. You won't see wires.
The way it is now.
Yeah.
I like the wire.
Got it.
I mean, they've actually.
Yeah.
Nick, Brian, they've got up there and they've lifted up rugs. And, here's for instance, and seeing what we have under there. We've got some beautiful irreplaceable hardwood floors that we can refinish. We have this crown molding. So it's like, for instance, we've discussed having one of the rooms or in that area just restored back to what it originally looked like, even though that was all an auditorium on the second floor back when the building was built. And the first floor was more utilized space, but just to see what's behind the curtain, not to tear it all down, just so people could maybe, oh, okay, just a little bit of history brought back.
I have just two remaining questions just on numbers. So I'm understanding that we've got like phasing of this conversation. So I'm trying to, where are we? Mark, you're talking about kind of the scope of stuff. You're going to talk about CPC and other stuff at a number. Okay, then I'll hold that stuff for later on. Thank you.
I have a question back on the contingency. If it does come to the end, and this might be a question, committee here, if it does come to the point where it's not all used and you want to redirect that money, and it's not on the list already for the work that you want to use that for, would that need to come back through here in order to be approved?
I mean, typically, if it's not
If it's
within.
not on the list and there's $500,000 still.
Yeah, I mean, if we pass it as like town hall improvements, but I'm guessing really with the amount of presentation we're gonna have, I think it's gonna be pretty clear. This is what we're getting for this money.
Okay.
And if we're gonna have $1 million of paving, it would be outside of that scope, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and I think it's important that, there's with any budget and this many projects here, there's gonna be some gains and some losses per line here. So I think from, how it's worded, language wise, I think it needs to be all encompassing so that you can respect the wins and losses on a line.
Right.
And, you know,
I think we're just asking the question around scope, but if the scope is related to these line items and one goes up 50 and another goes down 100 and another goes up.
or if there's even something that's potentially not here that's needed to facilitate here, just to, you know, in terms of basics.
But it's
Within
not,
scope,
not a water slide, right?
Correct, correct.
But to your point about the parking lot, if parking lot's not on here and there's extra money and you want to use it towards the parking lot, just as an example,
Mhm.
would that need to come back through here to get approved because it wasn't on the list, you know, on the itemized list?
I'd imagine so. I mean, our minutes are gonna reflect that Mark said
Yeah.
that's gonna be done
Yeah.
later. It doesn't include this, so I think we're.
That's just an example.
But I will say
Other
this.
Things to add.
The select board we're committed to working with capital in full transparency, as we are with the whole town. Is just to get the project done. So there shouldn't be any, you know, ducking and hiding.
Yeah,
No, I'm not taking that as an accusation. I'm putting that there. Is that, please don't get me wrong, is that we want to work hand in glove.
Yeah.
You know, as a town, that's why we're choosing, you know, working with the town hall folks, and like Brian, and Nick and everybody, Michelle, John, is coming together and seeing, we can get this project done.
No, I think, and I think what you're hearing from our end is more just
Yeah.
when we think about a 3.5 or a $4.5 million debt issue.
Yeah.
It eats up quite a bit of available capital, at least as we're currently structured, so. Conversation is like, if we don't land up using the contingency, that's back to the other departments that we're trying to support. It's not our money, it's our ability to support other departments is sort of what we're looking at, not necessarily.
I agree with you 110%. My only thought, just to leave it on the table, is that the building's sitting there. And every year or every month we let it sit, it gets worse and worse and worse. And someday, or at some point, we're at a kind of a, you know, inflection point with that building. We've got to do something with it.
Yep.
You know, we've had over the last number of years, we all know the iterations that have come through. And, you know,
I've stopped counting.
What's that?
I've stopped counting.
Since I moved here.
Yeah.
You know, we're just trying to envision it as now an asset to the common. So I picture it, and this sounds melodramatic. But with those doors flung open on, you know, the farmer's day, when the people out there, the doors are open, someone needs a place to go, you're having a play in there, you can get back to having a graduation or a prom. You know, town business can go and you feel good going into it. You see it and it's just a nice looking building on the common that looks like it's always been there.
And again, it follows that mentality of opening up building to the common, right? So having the bathrooms there that are accessible to support the activities on the common, whether it's the skating pond or the farmer's market or people just out for a walk, you know, and, you know, there's security in place there to functionally make those doors in that space in that vestibule operate in that nature so that it can be accessible when town hall is not open. And we've talked about that. You know, John was just pointing out that, you know, for something like the contingency too, if there's a space between the road and the building and the, you know, some of that hardscape that we need to figure out to make all the ADA work, that's where something like that would be funded.
Yep.
From the contingency to make it feasibly happen.
Mark, on the phasing side of, we got the phasing thing, when it comes to, are there any points where what the town is gonna take on is gonna be really impacted by what the nonprofit takes on? Is there some way that there could be some sort of, you know, extra cost on our end or something we can't get done if the nonprofit has some sort of delays? I'll ask about nonprofit later, but I'm just asking, you know, how critical is the nonprofit work to us getting our side done?
I don't think it would be, I think it would be more of a nuisance impact than, you know, if there's active work going on related to the nonprofit that was happening in a building where town administrative staff is trying to work. I think that would be the most impactful part.
There's nothing that we'd have to wait on them to get done before we could do something. Okay, that's just, you know, if we put money in work, but I don't want us to be waiting on it.
No, and if you kind of, if you look at it from just a very high level and from the sequence there's a lot of the historic stuff is stacked earlier.
Yeah.
And that's functionally done because what's available now for us to do, it's some low-lying fruit. It's, the building is empty. So getting that work done now without impacting town services is realistic. And then once you kind of get into that bigger phase of some of the more meat and potatoes of the construction work, that's when town staff would need to be relocated, and that's ideally when the cultural center would come in and do the meat of their work.
Gotcha.
The real noisy stuff, but you know, us doing some hazmat abatement and catch basins and some little stuff, some ceiling work and the flooring work that Nick's group has been doing, that stuff can start to happen.
That raises one question for me is, do you have a signed agreement with the cultural center at this point?
No, not yet, Ralph. We're in the genesis phase. I mean, we have wording, general wording down, what, you know, they're looking to do, what they're offering,
Okay.
and we're gonna finalize that. That'll come.
Is it sort of is it a contingency to get your part done, or is
It's
it?
not, the nonprofits right now are working with us. They're not, it's not mission critical to get done what we want to get done to the building. That means to the historical portion upstairs that we'll be working on.
Okay,
What we're hoping for is that the nonprofits are gonna work in conjunction, like Mark just said. So we haven't formalized a lease. We're looking at, will happen. But if it didn't happen, for instance,
Yeah.
we're gonna get the offices upstairs.
okay,
We're doing what we have to do to get our town hall and town hall staff safe and be able to open the doors to have business as usual. And if, heaven forbid, that didn't come to pass, I don't see that happening, especially with Glenn and crew
Okay.
behind it.
I mean, I would think this would need to pass before we could sign anything.
Yeah.
That's kind of my,
We have to get the building passed for them.
cart before the
you know,
horse, if you
before
will.
they sit down, then we sit down, we say, okay, we've got a project ahead of us. Now let's really hammer it out. We've got the basic
Okay.
ideas. Glenn's group has offered what they're willing to do.
so there's a $400,000 line item, which is of course the fire suppression and the alarm system. That is the town doing that? That's the town doing that. Okay, so that part does get done. And that's all 3 floors. That is in fact, 4 floors. You got the basement, the auditorium, the second, the attic, all of it.
Brian?
That's correct, yeah.
That's correct. Okay, so all that does get done. All right.
I mean, after all, it is the town's building, so we've got to do it.
Okay.
Glenn, are you representing the nonprofit kind of interest? Okay, I mean, do you want to just give us, just kind of give us sensation? I think to Mark's point, I think these are both hand in hand, like us going to the town and spending a bunch of money and then expecting a nonprofit doesn't exist, right? We don't want to have that either. So please share with us.
So we have a nonprofit, established, and our goal is to enter into this agreement. Such that we're able to do all the activities and things we want, at least it's written in such a way that qualify for start tax credits for big donors. So it's a lot of stuff going to work out well. We're hoping that the town meeting will give us authority to actually work on it. So that's another piece like Mike was saying, if we don't get the money, we get
Yeah.
Our group is, we're gonna restore the inside of the first floor. So that's the painting, the ceilings, floor restoration, adding bathrooms, and bring some iterations of, and bathrooms, bring the stage up to current theater production standards, physically and technologically.
Yeah.
And also underneath the stage, addressing those. And so we're confident that we can accomplish everything that we left to do in that space. Love to work in conjunction with my contractors. So that, you know, makes a little bit of sense. We expect that our investment will be close to $3 million.
Okay.
So we're a big player in this whole.
Yes, that's
whole
exactly
thing,
right.
which is why.
Hey.
Oh, so it's,
Did you establish a new nonprofit
yes,
specific
it's
for this
a
purpose?
nonprofit.
Okay.
Mhm.
And is there funding or grant opportunities that you already work with? Other nonprofits is mainly private fundraising.
Yeah.
What's your strategy?
we have a group of regular funding already.
All right.
Working on brand, so the brand, the tagline, what's going to call the Hall on Island, that's going to be, know, like people talk about the light keepers, so, that's what it is, and as we get closer to town meeting and stuff, push that, so we are we're thrilled with this whole thing. It attached a few years ago as an idea to help offset the cost of whatever we were doing. Now it's seeming that it actually is. Along with this event,
I mean, I think it gives that space purpose, right? And that space has lacked purpose in other versions. I mean, we've tried to create that purpose, but it's an awkward space size wise. It's not big enough for town meeting. It's too big for select board meetings on a bi-weekly basis here based on the acoustics. So it's kind of falls in that middle of the road, yet it comes in very handy when we need to vote. So,
but it turns out, it's not big enough voting anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So, good.
We think that, with all the different things that go on in town, unless you're involved, don't really know what's happening. We're all pulled together, and all these nonprofits, they work places will be popping all the time.
Thanks for that effort.
It's great.
Question from,
Just a question about the lease agreement, so. With themselves.
Sorry, are you,
Oh, sorry.
you have to.
Peter Longley, 12 Rustic Drive. Just a question about the lease agreement. So will the town be allowed to use the historic wing for any events, and how is that coordinated and managed?
Well, those are all things that have to be worked out at least, but that's the intention, that the facility is usable for the community, for town government, it's a hall.
Already pitching it. I like it.
So Ellen mentioned this earlier, that we're not the first town trying to do this. This has been done in other Massachusetts towns successfully.
What was it?
It's been done successfully in
I
other
think it's either
towns.
Holyoke or Northampton.
East Hampton did it first, and Arlington has done it as well. Arlington, Massachusetts, and a town in Western Mass has also done it. And they've been at it for years.
Natick has a similar thing.
Yeah. Now, so I just bring it up just to say that it's not like we're the first people that are paving this path. We
I
have
think
some
we
models
are.
to follow.
First one was the tagline, that's for sure.
I was going to ask something too, which is really associated with, are there any other potential spending amounts? And I'm thinking specifically about 135 King Street. These are going to hit us anyway going forward. Is there anything, can anyone speak to that at all? Is that going to come within the original allocated, 10.2 million, or is it going to actually exceed that? And if so, does that come back to us and become another borrowing from the town, or how, in other words, where are we on that? Because that's going to come up as well. I don't know. Anybody know?
So we're working on the design right now. We have some estimates coming along the way. We're going out to bid on the project at 135 King Street specifically. Bids will be due back in the August timeframe.
Okay.
So we'll actually have numbers then. to be
Okay, so
able
it
to
misses
share.
this town meeting. Okay,
So it'll be the fall town meeting.
okay.
So
that could be an additional. Yeah, got it. Right.
Yeah.
and with this structure here, with this 5.4 number, again, it doesn't include any contribution from CPC.
Yeah.
You can see that line is blank, so something just to keep in the back of your minds that there is potential there. We don't want to be presumptuous in what CPC would or going to contribute, but
Can we pivot to that? I mean, Ellen, you referenced CPC in your intro comments. I thought I had heard you say that there was a number for CPC in the spreadsheet. Maybe I misheard you. It's just a line item. Are there any conversations on the CPC side of this?
No, we haven't
Okay.
started yet, but
All right.
fully our intent to do so. This just all came together Friday and then a revision this weekend, so no, we
I
haven't.
mean,
heard of
CPC's, taken on a bunch of debt with a bunch of great projects on the
Yeah.
recreation side. Obviously, we also have to put some money on the historic side. Is there any number frame that you can give us at this point about kind of what is in the ether, or is it?
I don't think we've talked about that as a group.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Thank you.
We can all kind of speculate based on what offered up in the past.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So that's sort of the number I have in my head. I would love to hear from Nick and Brian, there's obviously been a lot of questions, but my big question is like, what have we missed in the conversation to date that you want us to know?
No, I think, we're looking at 30 lines here, just the general public, or anybody might be watching, of really fixing up what the envelope of the building is basically the same. Windows, the doors, the location are all the same. We talked about going through 5 or 6 different iterations of town hall with additions and tearing stuff down. That is not part of this project. This is just fixing up what we have in basically in its current configuration with new code compliance systems. And we've already done the roof, the painting. Nick, Paul had just mentioned, finished one of the floors last week across the hallway.
We're totally refinishing one office to show what is there, what we can make them look like with a historic building, which is turning out fantastic. So
It came out well.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, the floor
that's
looks
Well,
fantastic.
that's good.
Whose office is this gonna be?
They're redoing your old office, right? That was sewer? Yeah.
Beautiful.
You want back in?
But the list is comprehensive. This hits all of the big points. This is the stuff we really need to get done. And then the rest is smaller. And you said it yourself with, the 5 items are the bulk of the cost and the rest will fill in afterwards. But there's nothing that we foresee that would come up that would be major compared
The
to the list.
sequencing to me, I found very helpful,
Mhm.
by the way. I guess I was a little surprised that it was in 6-month increments instead of year-long increments. That would just felt quick to me. And so I appreciate that we're trying to wrap this up with a bow. But I did it sort of took me back that this is a lot to get done from June to June. And then in another 9 months, the second year. So I was just kind of curious, how aggressive is this from your perspective?
So, I think it's aggressive but realistic. I'd say the main thing, and this goes to your question about, spending the full amount, it's gonna be a phased, sequence of activity. So we're doing, the fire alarm, the sprinklers, the HVAC first.
Basically all historic, or mostly historic in the first 6 months.
Right.
Occupancy back.
To get those offices upstairs occupied, and that should help out with King Street, and hopefully with the phasing of that, moving people back in. And it's not one comprehensive project where it's gonna be bid all at once. It will be multiple projects putting out to bid. And that way, the smaller ones, we've already done, 2 or 3 of them. We're project managing them in-house. There's no, large, I guess, GC or any of the overhead that comes with that.
Yeah.
What on this list are the labor's gonna come in-house? I mean, back to Paul's point about not taxing your staff, Nick, especially with the myriad of other buildings and, we're fixing a bunch of things at once, so.
I mean, actual labor, not a ton is gonna be in-house. It's more gonna be the management of the projects.
Okay.
We've been doing a lot of the work in-house for some of the smaller things to like do test runs,
Yeah.
if you will. But I think part of the reason is so condensed too is when you're making an uncomfortable working environment, you'd rather get a bunch of projects done quickly. So yes, it could be staged out longer, but we wouldn't want to do that if we're going to be invasive anyway. So it makes sense to kind of do some of these around the same time.
Yeah, and I appreciate the sort of King Street abuts to the back end
Yes.
of the historic section in terms of like employee movement.
Yeah.
And there is money allocated here for helping along with the management of it. I mean, this is a big undertaking. This isn't what we as a town staff, and speaking for Nick's group and Brian's group, this isn't what they do all day. They don't do this level of capacity of work every day. They can't just squeeze this in with the rest of what they do. So there is some money there. on a specific line item to help allocate that. If someone needs to come in and be supplemented.
I didn't take the budget and then try and apply it to the sequencing, but do you have a rough cut of like what sequence 2 totals in terms of funding and what sequence 3 would total in terms of funding?
I mean, just looking at it from a high level, there's more historic on the front, and if you just line it up with the historic, it's, you know, you're at 3.1, so, and again, there's still some heavy historic stuff in the third phase there. But,
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to HVAC. HVAC is half of it, so if you could just tell me, like, we've got HVAC design for historic and HVAC for the annex, if it's roughly 50-50 on that $1.6 million, that sort of answers.
it's a fair assumption. It's a fair
Okay.
assumption that it's roughly that.
So HVAC is gonna, the biggie of HVAC is basically split 50-50, and then sequence 2 is pretty much all of the. Should I use the square footage allocation, or should I use just the the cost? You see what I'm saying, like the 5.6 million in total? I can either, I've got 992 against historic, 1 million against annex, and then 3.5, 3.6 million that's shared. How do I?
Well, we then allocated it down from that line, right?
Okay.
So that then that,
Oh, I see, that's why,
so that why,
that's why you did the 64, obviously, I'm sorry.
yep, so that way it took all the shared stuff out. And it
Okay.
added, it divided the shared items up 60-40 and added them.
Okay, gotcha.
I'll rotate to 5.6.
Oh, for instance, to 5.6, got
I
it.
checked it both ways. It works.
Okay, got it. Okay. Thank you for walking me through that. So I guess without having an exact, it sounds like
And there might be,
sequence 2 is around 3 something and sequence 3 is around 2.5. Is that fair?
it's in the range.
Okay.
And again, you know, there's material procurement, so there's the HVAC, there's some more procurement there than, it's a little bit more of a specific system that isn't just gonna be necessarily on a shelf somewhere.
And the only reason I keep on pushing on this is like, it does drive when the debt gets drawn down and when the debt interest kicks in, because part of the conversation is that we still have debt service of $573 million for this coming fiscal year. So
The memo, yeah.
yeah, so the idea is that the majority of the debt service associated with this project would hit in FY 27.
So.
Correct. Right, Chris, that's what your memo says. FY 27 is where this would.
Right.
hit. Yeah.
But if we're spending 3 million in the back half
Because-
of 25, it's sort of why I'm probing at this.
Well, but none of this really happens until remember, the back half 25 is fiscal 26.
Yeah.
We
Right.
have a July 1 fiscal years.
No, I know, but like, if you're drawing down $3 million during fiscal 26, how are you not incurring incremental
Well,
interest?
again, it depends on how much we're borrowing and how much we can lend to ourselves. We can front the money ourselves,
Mhm.
to ourselves. And then we borrow at the end of the cycle, you know, pay it for the,
Right.
so that's the plan. I mean, the plan would be, again, to kind of stage it that way, if it's possible. Again, it all depends on the magnitude of the costs and what our cash flow looks like.
Okay, again, I'm focused on the fact that during fiscal 26, we still have the existing debt of $573,000, which is a nut that we've already encumbered ourselves with. And I'm just trying to understand what portion of incremental interest
So the
expense.
goal would have nothing until 27.
Okay, that's the answer I was hoping for. Don't- The bag is only so big.
That kind of leads to your portion of the conversation, Chris, and Emma here spelled it out, so just want to summarize that.
Nobody's gonna leave, just leave me alone. Nobody wants to be with the money. That's her. Thanks. Nobody wants to talk about the money. So, you all have the memo I prepared. So, didn't talk about anything except, I mentioned CPC and, this potential free cash or whatever else, but we're going to want to focus on the stabilization. And I actually spent time with our financial advisor, which keeps all of our debt, and did some updates. So you have an updated, this is a miniature. I know you have, the electronic is much easier to read than anything printed. There is a significant debt roll-off, which is related to a bunch of projects. That all comes at the end of 27. And then there's another chunk that falls off at 28. So you add them both up, it's just shy of $470,000. And then I talked about borrowing. So we just did a borrowing. A large chunk of that's the rec project, and then the actual purchase of 135 King. And we ended up with a net interest cost of about 3.35%. The coupon on the bonds are 4 and 5. That's the way they were sold, but then they buy it at the buyers pay it down. So we end up borrowing less. So I use the 4% just to be super conservative. Obviously less interest cost, less interest, less cost. And then I just ran it for 10, because 10 years is probably fair on this. You can go longer because it's a building and it's components of a building. But the interest rate starts to, because it's it starts to get up around 3-4%. The compounding is real.
And
So
butts into other projects.
right. So keeping it at 10 just seemed like a more reasonable thing to do. And then I gave you the different numbers. I started at 3.5 on up to 5. And again, this is based on a 4%. You have under the spreadsheets themselves, which is a debt service calculator the Department of Revenue shares. So I didn't create that. That was something that's done. And well, there's two different options. I think the level debt service is probably the simplest, because we're not really trying to layer in projects so much here. You usually use that, like we did that with the CPC debt. Starts higher and ends up lower, a little less interest, but this isn't that much borrowing over 10 years. So the interest difference isn't much. Yeah, yes, it's not really that much. It's good to do. It's good to do the exercise, but it's, so effectively with that roll off, a $3.5 million debt would be fully covered. $4 million would be covered with an additional $23,000, and then it goes up from there. So there's definitely resources. And again, I know this affects the future, but it doesn't change the current number that's available going forward. I mean, it wouldn't drop off, but it wouldn't go up. If you have about a $3.5-4 million, so let's say for hypothetical purposes, the CPC was $1 million. I'm going to just use that as a guess. Then you're borrowing 4 on, or authorizing 4, and then you're at 5 or 5.5. So it's right about there. So, but even 4.5 is only an additional $85,000. And again, that could potentially be paid down if the contingency comes down, if some of the prices come down. So we're pushing this at the conservative end, the largest cost. And even with that, and even a $5 million number is, I mean, $146,000 is not nothing, but it's not a crazy amount of money either. It doesn't wipe out a $2 million annual allocation. So, but again, it's more impactful obviously than 4. So.
I mean, I think just for the capital budget committee information, just a couple things to note based on what we've been looking at in terms of our roll forward for FY26, just so that we're all aware. 2 things. One, we had been operating off of a debt service payment of $517,000. It seems like unfortunately, the October spreadsheet we were given by the town missed $56,500. So we've got to cover $56,500 just in our calculation when we think about what our overall availability is, and that's fine. Like we understand where that delta is. The other thing, when we were looking at our roll forward, we had repurposed articles at $384,000, and that was with Michelle. When we went through the exercise this fall, we looked at all of the appropriations that we believed had already been used, and there was money to come back to capital. And in the spreadsheets that we've been provided tonight, the select board has correctly identified that $163,635 is related to the overage from the roof. And so when we look at our roll off, we can no longer sort of calculate using a $384,000 number. We have to subtract out the $163,000. So between those two, there's $200,000 less in terms of flexibility relative to FY 26, just so that we're on the same page. And that's fine. We're still operating at 2.1 million in terms of our ability to spend, but we can't extend to 2.3 and not drop below an ending balance of $1 million. And Chris, you can comment more, but the reason we stay at $1 million is that the capital stabilization and the general stabilization are both the numerator for the financial reserve policy of 50%. So we've always stayed at $1 million in order to support the overall town's financial policies.
Yes, at the same time, we've come down below that from time to time because remember the capital stabilization fund is never static. It's not like the money goes away, right? So it's still sitting there until it's spent. I mean, it's allocated to a project. So it's rare that so it still counts as a bonus, even though we've allocated it, it's still sitting there. Until it's spent. So we've come down below $1 million on paper before and still ended up coming back over it at the end. And I am working to put 150 in, so it's going to be 2146 as our as the input this.
Yeah. In the warrant article, so we appreciate the incremental 150,000 from where we started a month ago. I guess, without specific guidance around how much lower than $1 million we can go, the policy, as I understand it, has always been sort of a base for us at $1 million because we don't hold the financial policies of the town. So we'd look to the select board or to Chris for guidance on that, or at least I would.
So I guess it would depend on what we're talking about, right? If you're coming down at $500,000, I'd say that's probably a little more dramatic. And unless it was something dramatic that we're gonna, if we have money to put right back in the fall or something like that, right? But when we've come down before over the last 11 years, we've probably maybe 859 is probably the lowest we've come down to. So
Okay.
So we've done. Yeah. So I'd say that's probably a safe number to come down to if it makes a project whole. Right? So and again, we're still, Michelle and I are still sweeping. We have a great contract accountant who's been great, and our internal team is great. So everything's clean and up to speed. And now we're going through old articles and peeling back. I was actually talking to our assessor too. They have a little bit of money that gets left over from abatements. So we're trying to figure out what's still available. So there might even be a little bit more that we can claw back out. So
In terms of repurposed articles, okay.
because there's capital articles, there's also regular articles that may not have been spent. They weren't capital, they were for other projects, and we may not spend them. So if we're not, they become repurposable too. So and we've also stripped, we had that money for the Avalon gift and the Toll Brothers gift. So that continues to make money. So we've pretty much, I think, pulled the Avalon out as a result of and able to fund that 90.
Yes.
So again, there might be an increment, if we could find another $50,000 or $100,000, it's just that much more to available. So we're going to try to do that.
Katie, the way I saw this thing was that if there was a compelling need, some department needed, I wouldn't mind going down to, and I've said this before in the past, 850 if I had to. If there was a compelling
Okay.
need, why not? We've done this in the past. Why not do it now? But if we don't need to, don't do it. That's how I look. It's really the needs. It's
Okay.
what's required. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, but just so we're all clear that there is 200,000 more that we've got to cover between pulling out the reappropriated
Yeah.
article
Mhm.
for
I know.
that and the
Yeah.
extra expense.
Yep.
And so again, there's definitely resources within the scope of that we already have to fund the conversation that's been had. So, and again, on the margins, if we need to find a little bit more here and there, we can scrub.
I did want to talk a little bit just about the impact of the interest expense on sort of the capital budget. And I did do a straw man that I circulated late. But I think it'd be helpful just to sort of talk about like what this means looking at FY 27 in terms of, again, not our money, but the money that
Here, I got extra.
is spent. Yeah, so I've got some copies too.
Is that what? Oh, this-
It's that, yeah.
oh, this is in color though.
Yeah, I know.
Color one.
I want pretty color. For the select board.
I'll take my copy back.
I'll keep it the color.
It's the Pastelli project is the
Did you get
yeah, so.
So it's a little bit of a, you want to narrate how we got there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thought process for me was if we encumber additional interest expense in capital stabilization, what does that leave us in terms of the ability to spend on everything else that we've got to accomplish for the town? And that's us as a community collectively. So I was sort of looking at FY 27 and I was saying, well, if the select board continued to fund a 2.5% increase, that would start us off with a capital appropriation of a little under $2.2 million. But right out of the gate, there are things besides interest expense that we know we're going to, I would call them the essentials is sort of what the straw man conversation is. We have bus leases that we've entered into. So we know right off the top that we're going to spend $195,000 in bus leases. We have been on a police cruiser replacement cycle that is not encumbering us, but we have been in a good place in terms of keeping our fleet current by spending $140,000 a year.
Yeah.
In FY 27, it turns out that the fire department needs a new fire engine, and I put in here $1 million. Michelle informed me it could be 2. And if you bond that over 10 years, you're talking anywhere from $125,000 to $250,000 for a new fire engine that we know is coming in FY 27. You know, the rolling stock inventory for DPW is extensive. I call it the F something fund, whether it's F.
450, not the other thing. Yeah.
It's F-350, it's F-600. This year, it's 2 Fs for 310. Next year, you know, for FY 27, it's F something for 150. You know, IT historically has run us anywhere from, you know, $200,000 to $400,000. Again, we're not compelled to do it, but it is something that we need to stay current on. So that just as kind of the essentials right out of the gate, you're spending $900,000. Then you layer in the existing debt payments, which, as Chris pointed out, are coming down from $573,000 next year, but they go down to only $120,000 in FY 27. And then you begin to layer in town hall. Now, again, choose your number, whether it's 3.5, it's 4, 4.5. I put in the lowest one. At 3.5, that's $431,000. So that gets you to, between the essentials and your debt payment, that gets you to a total committed number of $1.462 million, leaving you $700,000 to do everything else. And historically, about anywhere from 30 to 50% of that has gone to schools. $368,000 is small for the schools in this example. I think this year the ask is over 600, but that includes bus leases, so we'll call it 400. And then all the other departments, facilities, library, elder affairs, recreation, harbor, anything else that you want to do for CPD, CFD would have to fall into that remaining bucket. So this is just the reality of where the budget will be in terms of how we're trying to juggle it. Nothing more. I just think we all have to sort of look at this and say, the discretionary is going to be small.
Yeah, I mean, the discomfort is when we talk about, okay, we've got $2.2 million we don't, right? We have this amount of money because, again, we have things that we need to do. We need to lease school buses, right? We need to buy police cruisers, right? So when we're talking about this, it's not a whether we want to spend the money or not. It's how much room do we have until we start running into other things? So we run into, you know, Chromebooks or library walls or all those kind of things. I think right now, especially with the 2 funds, we're in a, I wouldn't say overly healthy place, but we're in a pretty good sustainable place when it comes to capital funding where we are right now. We're getting things done. There's some things we can't get done. We talked about digging the backhoe for the grave sites. There's stuff that we still can't always fit in, but I think we're in a healthy tension point. And, you know, there's a fine line between, you know, if we take this debt on, there's no way we can undo that, right? If something else comes out, we can't not pay that debt. So we just want to be sure that when we're talking about this, we still understand that this is the amount of money that we're gonna have to live with over the next 10 years. And I think based on, if you just, I did a 10-year of everything, if you look at kind of what we have coming, and if you're taking that $700,000 number, it's pretty workable. But, you know, we're kind of at the point where I think getting lower than that puts us in a place where we're under investing in other things across town.
Just gonna add, this sounds personal, but
Yeah.
this is something, you know, in my experience, you know, you do an addition on your house, you do something like that, you do it piecemeal. But if I do it next year, instead of this year, it's gonna be more expensive. Every year, things go up. Town halls aren't going anywhere. 41 Highland Avenue is not going there unless it gets hit by a bolt of lightning. All right, but as it is, we have to get it done. It is, there's really isn't a choice, you know, we've got people working in that building.
If all this isn't qualitative at all, this is.
No, I'm not saying
What
that. I'm
is
just
like
saying,
from
but I'm looking at it, you know,
Purely from the
as,
capital stabilization fund numbers,
but what,
this is where the town will be.
Corey, I fully understand
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
What I'm getting at.
I
is
agree, we
more
have
on
to
the
get it done.
personal side, is that something that is just, it's always gonna be there. It's
Yeah,
hanging
yeah.
out there, and it's gonna get more expensive and more expensive.
Right.
So, you know, when do you finally draw the line? And again, I'm not questioning what you're saying at
No,
all.
no, but what I think what you're missing, what I'm saying is, I'm in for this. And I want to see this get done, and this is the amount of money that I think we can do
Mhm.
before we start getting uncomfortable with other things. Like, so I'm saying, I'm in, let's go, here's what we can do out of capital stabilization.
Thank you.
But if it.
I was actually.
If you're
Harry, I
doing
was
like
actually-
9, then it's like, okay, the stuff we just can't do, right? Our job is to just give you a little bit of guidance looking forward, because we've talked to all the departments, we've talked to all the people about all the other things that are coming down the pipe. Everyone's got a list of a million things. And we're just trying to synthesize all that and say, listen, you know, after listening to everybody, this is the amount of money that we can do. Like,
I'm
so
actually
take it-
backing your comments.
Yeah, yeah, cool.
All right. But I'm adding a personal approach to it.
Ellen?
So really, the answer, you know, to alleviate just for you, you know, is a bigger contribution up front. You know, we programmed out 2.5%, we made that commitment, you know, in our goals, maintaining our facilities, one of our goals. We're not going to listen anymore to people saying everything's falling apart. And so the remedy is more money up front. Chris might not want to hear that, or it might scare him, but you know, it all depends on free cash. What we have going on free cash. And we know right now with free cash, we have an issue because we have an issue with the schools. We might have an issue next year. But I don't envision, as long as I'm on the select board, changing our posture on funding facilities and capital budget. I really don't. You know, there could be a lot of other things that come up. It's too important to the town to keep everything, what's the expression, to keep the trains running. You know, but then a little rickety lately. Yeah, so I think if we can get through the hump with the school issue, we can look at free cash back maybe more with.
And I think that's helpful because just so we're clear, 2.5% is $50,000. So it's
Right.
not like we're running around like funding a lot of projects with like
Right.
2.5%. So
But we-
your comment about free cash flow is important because, you know, if there was a way to get to a budgeted number instead of it being
Backfill.
100,000 back, well, it's sort of back calculation in terms of like what we have available instead of, you know, one year it's 0, another year it's 100,000, some years it's 350, another year it's 500. If there was a budgeted base after we get through this sort of crisis period that could be counted on from free cash flow in addition to an appropriation that grew at 2.5%, that would, in my mind, be helpful for planning purposes and go a long way to sort of creating that flexibility. Because if you've got, you know, you've got one HVAC event at Elder Affairs, that's unfortunately, our Black Swan events are never the $50,000 problem. It's always a $500,000 problem.
Mhm.
So,
And I think it's also important to underscore that where we are as opposed to where we were. So when I got here, we had Mark Kelly running around like the story of the kid at the dike running around, putting his finger and holding up things, right? We didn't have a real dedicated facilities department. There was no plan. So we've come light years, right? I mean, so, but you know, Nick and his team and Brian and his team are staying on top of things and investing. This building alone, right? When we were in the process of acquiring the message was, we're not doing this without a plan. So we actually invested in a plan about what we would have to do to maintain it, which we've done. And it's important that to remember that this is all integrated. I mean, so there is a plan, and Nick and his team are maintaining these things. Not that there aren't going to be investments that have to be made, and it's going to be some black swan events, but they're better than they were. And by replacing things on a regular basis, and these core things, by the way, those are core to what we do, right? Getting kids to school, the public safety, capital. A lot of communities don't do that. I wish they did, but we weren't even doing that 11 years ago. So we've come light years now. This debate is healthy. It's part of the ongoing conversation. What do we do as we keep going? And I think that Town Hall is one of those. It's not a black swan; it's a decayed swan that needs to be, you know, spruced up and given fresh feathers. But you're not getting a new swan. We're not buying a fleet of swans. It's the old. It's, you know, or like a swan boat. It's all being cleaned up and
New analogy.
yeah. So, but the nice thing is that it all works, right? It doesn't. It's not scavenging anything. Now it does. You know, it's an impact, but it's as Paul has said repeatedly, we're there, right? And this is, I've watched in just my time, I know Ralph's seen many more than I have about proposals. This is the most cost-effective proposal that there's been, for sure. And it's achievable in a reasonable amount of time. And it's most certainly not a platinum plan. It's a bronze plan. But that said, that's all we need. We don't need platinum.
And that's what we've been told
Yeah.
that by the voters that they want.
Right.
Right, this is where we're giving what's been asked. And I think that part of this too is that by doing this, follows the mantra of the police cruisers and the DPW of continuously, the IT of continuously investing in it.
Yep.
Because we haven't invested in it.
Yep.
And, you know, even on advisory, we've been tapped to get the elevator back up and running because the elevator failed. And those things aren't gonna go away unless we do this. And by the level, the debt service level of funding, I mean, it proves that we have done it, we can do it, we can live in those parameters. And with a 2.5% increase, that'll only allow us to let that grow and maintain as costs of everything go up.
Yeah, that's, I mean, like, if you look.
Right, it's not like there's
The money doesn't go up, right? Because like even with police cruisers, everything goes, it all goes up, right? And that's kind of the thing where we've been saying, if we project this number about, hey, if we take on this debt service and we have X amount of money, the assumption is that the money that we're getting is going up, so everything else is going up. If not, then like you start, if you look at the 5-year projection,
start closing
it gets really, really uncomfortable if we don't have the two. That's.
What's not in here anymore is roads, right? We have a separate funding source for
Which is
roads,
why
right?
we're in a better place, roads.
For sure. And the major school infrastructure.
I just want to comment that don't undersell what you're doing on the town hall. You're doing a great job. You're doing something significant. So it's more than bronze, okay?
Yeah, I'm just saying, it's not,
agree with
yeah.
you.
No, it's an important.
agree.
point, yeah.
Okay.
I'm just pricing it as bronze.
Okay.
It's the bronze
Yeah,
price.
Chris.
It's a platinum project for a bronze price. All right, anyone want to sit in the hot seat?
And again, you guys, just to close it up, it's working with the nonprofits. Susan group that we've had, it's been invaluable. Because everybody's just popped up with a different idea and coming up and again, trying to think outside the box. That's, as you said, some other towns are doing it. I didn't know they were. You mentioned that, which is fantastic, and it seems to be working for them. It's just, the building's there, we have to do something with it. And if we can get those doors open, this is gonna sound crazy. I see that open for a Halloween party, kids sticking their heads in it for apples and, just something like that. If you want to bring back that old town feel, that building's
It's an asset.
got everything going for it.
It's an albatross.
Exactly. It's been hanging around our necks for a lot of years.
And I think this is very, very impressive, and what both Paul said and what Mark said, the voters spoke. We have tried every possible way, and then we finally listened to what the voters did, And this group is working very, very hard, and I know it's been very difficult for them. But this is a doable thing. I've had some experience in my early career dealing with very old buildings. It's doable, and we can do it. Voters have said that's what they're going to spend. We're now at an inflection point where we put together a plan. And this town hall working committee's done an excellent job, put together a plan that works. It also meets the very strict financial constraints that the voters repeatedly and unquestionably said that's what it is. So it's well thought out. The numbers are appropriate, they're not inflated, and there's room for moving forward. So, and it gives our town, with the other thing the voters want, they want a town hall. They want it there. And I will hand it to Glenn and the nonprofits. They saw an opportunity, and I've also always thought that separating the nonprofit, the auditorium from the working part of town hall makes a lot of sense. And I congratulate Glenn Pratt and the cultural group for stepping forward. Now, I think it's a great program, and I congratulate all of us about putting it together.
Yes.
I just want to say, Ellen, I think your opening statement was wonderful. I think that's the message that needs to get out to the public. And it's something that everybody in this room agrees we need to do. And as a taxpayer, it's certainly something I would support. So thank you for that statement. That was really good.
Anyone else?
No?
So I
Any
guess-
questions on the little one pager we gave? Kind of,
Okay.
I mean, and so, okay, and the other thing, I was just batting this around in my head, like, I know we don't have free cash, but anything that, if there's some sort of, I would encourage a loose policy of saying, hey, if we have to go over this amount, you know, have some sort of just at least verbal commitment to, you know, free cash, sending it towards the project if we can't fit into that little bucket that we just talked about, if that makes any sense. But we're not far, we're talking about, you know,
Yeah, by the fall, I mean, you know, there's a cycle every year, so. we get to
I'm
the
saying
fall,
every
you know, we have
year.
numbers and, you know, depending on what, you know.
but years going forward too.
But to Katie's comment about the predictability of the free cash, that would be great if we could get a little more predictable, because it helps us in the out years that we're looking towards to know what we can do today, not at the detriment.
So again, the policy, it says, yeah, you put things to one-time cost typically first, right? Which is often which the biggest chunks have typically gone to capital or specific capital projects.
It says stabilization funds first, then one time.
Yeah, well, the stabilization funds, the primary one's been funded lately has been capital, because the general stabilization is at a
Yep.
decent number. We'll have to put a little money in that at some point, but not today. The challenge this year is, it's just, you know, we have this black swan budget event. I hope that's all it is. And I met with superintendent last week, so I know they're working really hard. And I've also said, there's only so much we can do. So they're sharpening their pencils, or whatever they use these days. And so hopefully at the end of the day, we'll be better. But, and in the fall, we should be, hopefully back to a more traditional spread. So, and the first thing you do is you pay for things you don't have to borrow, right? So,
No, it's more, I think Susan nailed it. It's a budgeting. So even if there was a baseline number that could be a take, or even in a written policy, that would be.
well, the policies are under review. So, if you have thoughts, just pass them along.
I guess my question, my sort of parting question is, you know, great conversation tonight, but next steps, obviously, select board is going to start a conversation with CPC. In terms of like timeline to get to a final number that you think would need to be funded via debt service? What are you thinking in terms of how quickly that's going to come together?
CPC meeting again?
We're meeting at 17.
Yeah. March. Yeah, I'd say we're probably talking about mid-ish March, or the week or so after that, because we're gonna socialize this with them in advance of that. Yeah, so.
I mean, I think.
And I know their finances. I mean, if you've been, they actually have $3 million in the bank right now that could be good, that could, for next year, that could be spent on anything. Now, I know that there's a couple of big asks, well, one big ask. So there's still a fair amount of CPC money available right now. That's, you know,
And just from a process standpoint, we've obviously heard the proposal tonight. The next step is to figure out some of the other funding sources to get to the net number that needs to be funded. And it sounds like what you're saying is the week of the 24th is probably when you're gonna know that for sure, if CPC is meeting on the 17th. Okay. And then what would capital be expected to vote on?
I mean, we've given you an outbound kind of indication of where
we're
our
at?
numbers are. Is that enough?
Net, yeah.
The net difference.
Then the net, it's the five,
Yeah.
what's it, 5.4 less whatever. CPC.
Okay.
Okay.
Whatever we can get from
Bottom right
CPC.
number is less.
I thought it was an obvious question, but
Yeah.
worth asking. Okay, so it's the net number that we would need to vote on.
Yeah.
And would that be in a separate article from,
We haven't really strategized that
Okay.
yet. We'll probably talk about it tomorrow night.
okay,
I mean, yes, I think the board has to make the decision. I mean, this could be just rolled, because it's not it could be rolled into the regular capital article, just make it a little bit bigger, but I mean, it's because it's, you know, fits in the stabilization fund. It's not any special ask.
I guess
Um,
the
CPC would be separate.
the reason I'm asking is
CPC has its own article.
our goal is to start voting sooner than that.
Right.
Obviously, we're trying to wrap up conversations next week and start voting potentially the week of the 10th and 17th, so that we're wrapped up except for town hall conversation.
Then again, this doesn't go into FY 26, so our math doesn't. really-
Right, which is why I think it works, but,
Yeah, this shouldn't have any impact on 27. So that's it. The authorization would need to be voted on
correct.
now.
Okay, all right. Which is why I was sort of, in my mind, a separate article made some sense, because it's 27 money, not 26 money.
Well, it's not even, it's not even the money. It's really the debt authorization. That's the most important aspect of it. Because we're not really spending any money until 27. So we're not allocating any money. We're just authorizing the borrowing.
Yeah.
So,
To go against
Okay.
27.
yeah.
Okay.
Budgeting.
Thank you.
Be
guys.
grateful for that.
Yeah, you pay for it.
Thanks, guys, very much.
So can I have a motion to conclude the select board meeting at 8:25.
So moved.
Second? You moved it, you seconded?
I'll second
All in
it.
favor? Aye.
Aye.
Guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
We'll talk later. So, I mean, the capital budget committee, you want to talk about the little one pager that Katie made, is everyone following that math? Is a little bit vague. We just tried to put a ruler in the sand to say, okay, what are we looking at?
Just based on average.
No, it's-
Yeah.
So you can, this is kind of.
That's the.
Exactly.
Nice, good work, Mark.
$350,000 Harvard Act. That's
A lot.
Take it all.
gonna come out of the 737, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, but the numbers we were things like unknowns, like the stuff that we know is coming through. And then you kind of have to make a little bit of a educated leap to say, okay, 700 grand is kind of the Chromebooks and this and the ramp and all that other stuff, right? So that's historically, that kind of fits if you just kind of go through what we've gone through. You know, you're kind of at an okay place.
But it's not Harbor Master, it's not the new facilities building.
I think that stuff's gonna be one-time free cash. $300,000 is hard
Yeah.
to absorb.
Exactly.
So
But that's the conversation of like, you can't.
We should just buy
Buy a trailer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
doing that up at the field, and it
It's-
turned out it was
no,
gonna be a lot more
No,
expensive.
it was half the price.
Yeah, the field one came in winter, but it was great. Yeah.
Anyway.
But I mean, math makes sense. Okay, cool. Yeah, good.
Again, it was
It has
more
been-
for me just to say like, once we collapse this down, like, are we have something to operate with or how tight? Tight, but it's not.
Well, I think we're gonna have some tight period.
I know, that's not his job.
But we're not, the worry was we're not strangling ourselves, right? Like, my thing was like, okay, well, I went out 5 years, like, in year 5, what does this look like?
Right.
And if we don't get the 2.5% and we're borrowing, let's say, $5.5 million, we're out of money, right? But if we are getting the 2.5% and we're borrowing 3.5, we still have the 700 grand to spend. Like, so that's kind of where I tried to do an A, B kind of pathway.
If you put
Well, I
No,
know
I did
what-
that.
what-
I
well,
bonded
and-
that.
Oh, you
and-
did?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Oh,
then
oh, it says 1 million.
it's the one here, yeah, Corey did
Yeah, yeah,
it.
here.
Corey, like, we both
I
took
bonded
track.
them.
Corey did it quite slightly different. We both came out with 700,000 in slush fund at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, because you also got the ladder truck in 3 years, but those may not get here for 2 years, but whatever. I mean, but you know, we average those costs out for a bond rate at this. And so you're still at, you know, $700,000. So, but again, that also, well, I guess, and then it goes to 8 and 9 because the 2.5 adder, but everything else is getting more expensive. So it's always going to be tight, but that's what it's supposed to be tight, right? That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Good.
good. You seem happy, Ralph?
I'm happy. No, no, you know, the only thing I see is that, you know, that we take for granted, so, for example, we take for granted we have 2 police cars every year because we're only gonna run.
I had this thought the other day.
Yeah, there are ways here, there are some other things to talk about. I know
The
that.
fire engine's in good condition.
Yeah, you ask hard questions about is the necessity of doing these things and not necessarily take them for granted. And that's why I say there's flexibility in this thing. That's how I see it.
Right.
I mean, the essentials change and the parameters on the essentials can change.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's, that's how I look at
Yeah,
it.
and we can bend them. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
All right.
And,
Hmm?
you know, I'm,
I was talking to Kevin.
yeah,
Throwing your voice over me.
I'm always cautious about prices. As you know, I don't necessarily take for granted that the prices that I hear necessarily are the right ones. So, you know.
Never are.
They're either, it's either 10 times worse or, you know, 5 times better. Like,
But, you know, there are real numbers that could be adapted here that
And I
change
think
things a
all of
lot.
our,
Anyway, yeah,
anybody who's been on capital budget a long time
knows.
knows that,
Yeah.
you know, things that come up on the list often end up getting pushed off for good reason.
Yes.
And I'll use the salt shed as an,
Yes.
how many about that
Oh, my
before we
goodness.
got it to the point.
Oh,
where
that
we were
must have been
really
5,
ready
6
to
years of
make a
it.
decision
You're
on
just
what
gonna
it
go
was.
out there
It's the first year.
Buy a
paid
camping
off.
tent.
Yeah, So,
It is.
so that's why you know, you can
Right.
take these
We could
plans and
install
look at them, but you
Yeah.
really do have to, you know, realize that they're not perfect. They're just a construct that.
Yeah.
Directional
They're messy. Yeah,
construct.
that's okay.
We do have a set of minutes. So couple things. 10:28, the video recording is scrambled, so I will write up minutes for that based on my notes and people can fill in the blanks. So that is the 10:28 is only important because that had some votes for
Yeah,
special town
mhm.
meeting.
Yeah.
But I think we can vote 11-4 because that was correct as drafted.
Could continue with.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah, I've got notes too.
So we could vote 11-4, which we've previously seen. You know where the votes were. Now we know that they're in the missing 10:28 minutes. And then we got a new set of minutes for what was it? Yeah, sorry. It was February 10th that people have had a chance. We could vote that also.
Don't know if I've got,
I don't know, I don't.
I don't know if
I
I've,
don't
Feb
know
10's in
that I
there.
saw for the.
I'm not sure I saw.
It's in the OneDrive.
Is it in the OneDrive?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was financial policy discussion, and then we did the DPW and
Yeah.
sidewalk
Mhm.
conversation. Yeah.
Mhm.
I like that, we got the agenda at the top.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. It was in the
The 224.
or 224. Anyway, so we don't have to vote those, we don't have to vote anything tonight. We could do it all next week if we want, but just so people are ready, I think we could do 11-4. I can draft the 228 and we could vote the 210 once people have
Okay, that
had a
makes sense
chance.
to me.
Okay.
think
Let's do
Let's
them all
do
at once.
let's do-
Let's
Yeah,
do
no,
it
no.
one off, do 3 next week.
It will send an
Yeah.
email with links to them all.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
was-
if
check that
anything
out.
else, if Tina has anything else, we'll do another.
But on the Zoom recording, it's just buggered, what?
Wasn't there.
It wasn't there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There's you guys in meetings where I went back and looked like they weren't recorded.
Oh, weird. I mean, this meeting is being recorded, so like in my brain, that if it was missing, I'd be like, nothing, something's not right.
So for next week, for 3-3,
Schools.
schools,
Coming
so
back.
this is the question, I think it's the right time to have them back. On the 10th, they're not available because they're in collective
Mhm,
bargaining, so
mhm.
I think it's either the 3rd or the 17th in terms of having it back.
Probably earlier is better.
Okay.
Yeah, it's still somewhat fresh in our minds and they've given us a bunch of stuff on follow-up and we want to get them while they're, if it's 6 weeks between conversations, you can't remember anything. Right now, we're at 3 weeks with one
Mhm.
vacation week in between. We're already behind enough,
Okay.
so.
Okay.
All right, so I'll reach back out to Sarah and so I packaged up the questions and sent them off. I had a couple small answers come back from Sue Owen, who I've just been sort of holding on, and I'll try and match them up. And then I'll sort of see where we are, but I'll invite them to the 3rd and see if they can come back and answer all of the follow-up. That'd be great. Brian Joyce owes us pricing.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna buttonhole him, but he
Skedaddled.
I think the message is pricing by the 3rd or no votes on the. the
yes.
10th.
I do think you coined the F something though. Yeah,
Yes.
The F something request, yeah. We'll
Exactly.
F something.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, so it'd be minutes, schools and whatever, besides pricing on DPW stuff, is there any other follow-up that we need?
Facilities is the parking lot ask, is that just getting pushed?
I believe so.
Okay. All right, so that's down to 0.
What about all the security
Well, IT, I'd say that we still, I've got questions on IT still.
related to
I-
security
Well, I think
cameras
that
or?
related to what I
I thought
actually,
we were starting
related to what
this-
we actually sent out as a memo. We really didn't get much back that was,
Yeah.
No, it's kind of typical
Well,
Robert,
if we
but
wanted
yeah,
to
right.
do
that's
pilot,
right. So
yeah,
there's more there.
All right, let's look at that again and
Okay.
let's see if we want
So
to
do
have them
that
come.
before we have a vote and don't haul them into a meeting, see if we can get the answers coming back, yeah.
I'll follow up on that too, yeah.
Okay,
Great.
right.
Yeah, and then, yeah, because we've got the 3rd and then we've got one more slush meeting and if we
Yeah.
just have a little stuff for Ron.
Yeah.
And if he can get us something in writing and that's a little bit easier then.
The other one we need, and I know this is tough to say, but 500,000 for an ambulance and having it sort of retiring an ambulance with 90,000 miles on it or something of the sort. We really need to chat a little bit about whether that is our right strategy. So, and that's a tough one. I know it is, but that's an early retirement for essentially a brand new piece of equipment.
But are you talking, the 90,000 is on the primary or the secondary? Because we do.
On the primary, yeah, the primary.
But the primary goes to the secondary and the secondary we get rid of. So how many miles does the secondary have?
Well, the secondary is a 14-year-old machine.
Yeah,
Okay, so
exactly.
now we're getting a new one, right? So,
Yeah.
but they're getting a new one in 3 years. We've got 45,000 miles on the current new. machine.
Oh, really? Okay.
And roughly, it's 15,000 miles a year. So
Yeah, yeah.
3 years from now, when we get the new one, we'll have 90,000 miles approximately
Yeah.
on essentially a new machine. And now we're retiring a machine that hasn't even reached its warranty period. I mean, I'm asking myself, why are we doing this? It used to be 12 years. And I have the old notes from Brian,
Chief Sylvia.
Sylvia. It said 12-year cycles, not this.
Well, wasn't the 12-year 6 and 6 primary, then 6 secondary?
No, it was.
Okay.
So the real question is, do we really retire a machine at 90,000 miles? I don't understand that. So there's a bigger issue for me there. So we ought to, that's before he comes in and gets embarrassed on it, right? We really need to ask a much more serious question. Why are we doing this so soon? We should not be retiring a machine that is an ambulance at this point.
Okay, yeah,
That's how I look at it.
all right.
So those are the two.
You can also ask,
Better get them resolved before, we start voting on it.
It sort of goes back to the rolling stock question. Fortunately, he has not given us a rolling stock, and as part of that rolling stock, if
Yeah.
we just use the DPW, we'd have purchase, mileage,
Yeah,
annual.
yeah, I know.
I'll
It's
work
great.
with
It's
him
a
to
great
get that.
list.
thank you.
It's a great list.
It
Yeah.
was really
Yeah.
very thorough.
So the rest
And
of
we
the
need
week,
that because
I don't
Yeah.
need him to get that. I can work with one of his.
Yeah.
Have a guy walk
offices.
around and.
Yeah.
especially since we've got $1 million, well, we've got the engine coming up in 27, and then in 29, we have the ladder.
The
There's
ladder
just-
truck.
There's
right.
just a lot of rolling stock.
It's a lot of
that's coming.
dollars and
The
not a lot of
ladder
wheels.
truck,
Yeah.
boy.
That's
Oh, I
right.
know. And
Yeah.
it's right now, it's in the plan at 1.7, and that's
Is it
just.
really
no.
2 point?
So I was looking up some numbers and it's looking like it's coming in around 2. In a ladder truck, forget it. I mean, you're well over 3.
Yeah, I think forget it. I think that's the answer. Forget it. We'll change zoning. No two story houses anymore. Everyone's got a ranch.
These are really tough questions, though, when you're talking about public safety equipment.
Yeah.
Really tough, very
I'm
tough.
glad that could be really helpful.
Yeah, I'll work with them this week
Okay.
to get
You
it.
know,
So hopefully we'll
so-
have it in the packet so you can at least review it next week.
Okay.
Yeah,
There's not
yeah.
that much equipment. We should be able to just knock that one out.
I mean, I feel bad. I mean, DPW has what, 30? I was surprised at how much stuff there is. A lot of it's old. We have a lot of stuff.
We have a huge amount when you look in that garage.
Yeah.
A lot of things driving around town.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they've pushed off a lot of those things.
Yeah.
over
Well, their
time.
stuff gets beat, right? I mean, the fire trucks sit in a beautiful controlled garage. They get washed all the time. The guys take good care of it. The DPW don't have time to like take their F something to the car wash every day, right? So- And they're throwing shovels.
doing it.
One thing that-
I'm gonna coin that term. That was great.
One thing that Brian did say to me when we went, and looked at, because you weren't with me, Katie, but anyway, we
Yeah.
talked about the fact, why in fact are these machines rusting out? Well, one of the reasons is we have salt, right?
Yes.
So that's it.
And they drive around.
They allegedly wash them, but when I was there, I could pull the salt off the truck myself. What we talked about was the fact you almost need a washing station. You need something because the real
We've been
problem.
talking about that for years.
I know, but the reality is you're not gonna, in 32-degree weather or 20-degree weather.
Can't wash.
You're not
Yeah.
gonna wash them outside.
Well, you're gonna
No.
freeze the door shut. The poor guy won't be able to get in. to
That's
put
right.
this-
Yeah, they ice up. But so anyway, there are
Drive them
other
over the
things
thing
that
and
would
sprays the
extend the
water.
life of some of these things. I'm not sure what it would cost, but it makes sense when you hear it. Right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. We should look into it.
Yeah, I mean, do some things that extend the life of our equipment. That's how I look at it. That includes, of course, the facilities department. That's why I support a garage. Let's keep this stuff going.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's expensive toys not to
They're
take care
very,
of.
they're becoming incredibly expensive toys. Yeah.
All right. So
gotta
I
be
will
careful
follow
about
up
the
with
word
schools.
toys.
You'll
Cut
follow
that.
up with IT.
Okay, you know what I mean.
Right.
And
I would love,
And Michelle,
love my.
Michelle, you follow up with fire.
Yeah.
We'll go.
I wouldn't mind one either.
And
right?
you, Brian, for me, one more time.
I think Brian poked himself tonight.
Yeah, well,
That's why he ran out of here.
well, you shared his cell phone number with me now, so his voicemail. Yeah, no, his voicemail at work is perpetually full, so you can't.
All of ours are full. We get sales calls all day long.
Yeah.
It's maddening.
Hmm.
Today, I finally just hit to voicemail probably 30 times because it was all sales calls.
Yep.
So tomorrow I have to clear 30 messages that I know are all sales calls.
Yep.
And hence nobody can leave a legitimate voicemail for you.
Well, they find us.
They find, no, and it's not like that.
Mm.
Sometimes
you pick up, oops.
Yeah, exactly.
Or they call somebody
Or
else
you
like,
go-
Michelle, I have so and so. No, not here.
I'm gonna go with it.
Um,
Anybody's can come if they want, but I'm gonna go with it.
what is the
Select
select
board.
board talking about tomorrow with capital?
Wait, what are they? Yeah. Are you're going?
So they're just reviewing
It's my daughter's.
capital asks. So your capital plan so far for FY 26.
Okay. Which is right now without town hall totaling $1.9 million, so.
But we haven't voted anything yet.
Right,
so-
right. And they're
Request.
aware of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've heard $1.9 million of requests.
Mhm.
We're looking forward to voting it. Thank you very much. Good night.
Would be a
Pretty much.
conversation.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor?
Bye.
All right.